The espresso machine in Lorenzo Vitale's private office hissed like a serpent, steam curling into the air thick with the scent of dark roast and expensive leather. I stood at the mahogany sideboard, preparing his third café of the morning with the practiced efficiency of 6 months under his employment, though under felt like the wrong preposition. More like beside, or perhaps against, considering how often we clashed. "The Calabrese file is on your desk," I said without turning around, knowing he'd entered even though his footsteps made no sound on the Persian rug. Lorenzo Vitale moved like a predator, silent, purposeful, always aware of every living thing in his vicinity. And before you ask, yes, I removed the clause about the harbor contracts. No, I didn't ask permission. Yes, I was right to do it. Behind me, I heard the soft rustle of fabric as he settled into his chair, followed by the distinctive click of his Mont Blanc pen. "You're particularly insubordinate this morning, Lily." "It's 3 in the afternoon, Mr. Vitale." I finished preparing his espresso exactly as he liked it. No sugar, served in the specific cup his grandmother had given him, the one with tiny gold filigree around the rim, and turned to face him. Lorenzo sat behind his massive desk, like a dark prince surveying his kingdom. Charcoal suit tailored so precisely it looked painted onto his broad shoulders. Dark hair pushed back from a face that belonged on Roman coins, all sharp angles and aristocratic bone structure. But it was his eyes that always caught me off guard. Storm gray and relentlessly intelligent, capable of reading every micro-expression, every tiny tell. Those eyes tracked me now as I crossed the office, and I felt their weight like a physical touch trailing down my spine. I'd learned early in my employment that Lorenzo noticed everything. The way I twisted my grandmother's ring when anxious, how I bit my lower lip when concentrating, the precise angle of my head when I was about to deliver bad news. "The meeting with the Rossi brothers is at 7, I said, setting his espresso on the desk with perhaps more force than necessary. A single drop escaped, marring the polished surface. "I've prepared the briefing documents. Marco will drive you. I won't be here." His hand, reaching for the cup, froze mid-air. "Excuse me? I'm leaving early today." I kept my voice steady, professional, even as my heart began its familiar staccato whenever Lorenzo's attention fully focused on me. "I have plans." Plans. He repeated the word as if I'd spoken in a foreign language. His fingers drummed once against the desk, an unusual tell of irritation from a man who'd built his reputation on absolute control. What kind of plans? Personal ones. The silence that followed stretched like pulled taffy. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him, Manhattan glittered in the late afternoon sun, all steel and glass and money. From this height, in this office, Lorenzo Vitale surveyed an empire that extended far beyond legitimate real estate holdings and import businesses. Everyone knew what he really was, though no one said it aloud. Not if they valued their continued good health. I'd learned the truth 2 months into my employment, stumbling across a conversation I wasn't meant to hear. The smart thing would have been to quit immediately, to run far and fast from the dangerous world Lorenzo inhabited. Instead, I'd walked into his office the next morning, placed his espresso on his desk, and said, "The Martinelli shipment arrives Tuesday. You'll want to be there personally." He'd stared at me for a full minute. Then, "You're either very brave or very stupid, Miss Morgan." "I'm practical, Mr. Vitale, and I make excellent coffee." Something had shifted between us in that moment. An understanding, perhaps. Or maybe just the acknowledgement that I'd stepped over a line and couldn't step back. Either way, I'd kept my job, my silence, and my growing addiction to the particular brand of chaos that was working for Lorenzo Vitale. Now he stood, moving around his desk with that predatory grace. "Personal plans," he repeated, his accent caressing the words. Lorenzo's English was flawless, but in moments of strong emotion, His Italian heritage colored certain syllables. With whom? That's really none of your business. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Everything about you is my business, Lily. You work for me. I work for you from 9 to 6. What I do after hours is my own concern. I crossed my arms, a defensive gesture I immediately regretted when his gaze dropped briefly to the movement, before returning to my face. We stood too close now. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, something custom-made that probably cost more than my monthly rent, with notes of bergamot and cedar. Close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw, a thin white line that spoke of violence in his past. You're wearing perfume, he observed softly. You never wear perfume to the office. My pulse jumped. I dabbed on my favorite scent while getting ready, a subtle vanilla and jasmine blend. The fact that he'd noticed, that he knew my typical routines well enough to identify this deviation, sent a flutter through my stomach that had nothing to do with fear. Perhaps I felt like it today. His eyes narrowed slightly. And your hair. You usually wear it up. My hand moved instinctively to the loose waves falling past my shoulders. I'd spent an hour with a curling iron this morning, something I rarely bothered with for work. I have a date, Mr. Vitale. Is that acceptable to you, or do I need written permission to have a personal life? The temperature in the office seemed to drop several degrees. Lorenzo's expression didn't change. He was too controlled for that. But something dark and dangerous flickered in his storm-gray eyes. A date. His voice was silk over steel. Yes, a date. That thing where two people who aren't employer and employee go out and enjoy each other's company. I regretted the sharp tone, even as the words left my mouth. 6 months of working for Lorenzo had taught me that poking the bear was thrilling, but rarely wise. And who is this fortunate individual? His name is Tyler. We met at Sophia's birthday party last week. I grabbed my purse from where I'd left it on the side table, suddenly desperate to escape the suffocating intensity of Lorenzo's scrutiny. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go home and change. I made it 3 steps toward the door before his voice stopped me. Change into what, exactly? Clothes, Mr. Vitale. It's generally frowned upon to go to dinner naked. His jaw muscle jumped, the only sign of his irritation. You know what I mean. I turned back, inexplicably annoyed by his questioning. 6 months of his orders, his criticisms, his occasional rare praise that felt like winning the lottery. 6 months of watching him parade through the office with a rotating cast of beautiful women, each more stunning than the last. 6 months of pretending I didn't feel anything when he stood too close, when his hand brushed mine passing documents, when he called me into his office late at night, and I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Something nice, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Something that makes me feel pretty. Is that all right with you? Or do you need to approve my wardrobe choices as well? For a moment, Lorenzo said nothing. Then, be careful, Lily. You don't know what kind of men are out there. The concern in his voice, genuine concern, caught me off guard. I softened slightly. I'll be fine. Tyler's a stockbroker. Very respectable. Stockbrokers can be dangerous too. Not as dangerous as some people I could mention. The words slipped out before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted them when I saw Lorenzo's expression shudder completely. 5 o'clock, he said, his voice now purely professional. Cold. Don't be late tomorrow. I nodded and fled, my heels clicking rapidly against the marble floor of the outer office. My hands trembled slightly as I gathered my things, adrenaline and something else, something I didn't want to examine too closely, flooding my system. Lucia, the receptionist, looked up from her desk with knowing eyes. Trouble in paradise? There is no paradise, I muttered, jabbing the elevator button repeatedly. Just a very bossy man who doesn't understand boundaries. Lucia's smile was sly. If you say so. The elevator ride down 43 floors gave me time to collect myself. This was ridiculous. Lorenzo Vitale was my boss. A dangerous man. A man who lived in a world of violence and power that I wanted no part of. The fact that he made my pulse race and my skin flush was irrelevant. Inconvenient. A complication I absolutely could not afford. Tyler was safe. Normal. Boring. Perhaps, but boring was good. Boring meant I could sleep without worrying about men in dark suits showing up at my door. Boring meant a future that didn't involve federal investigations or rival family disputes. Boring meant not feeling like I was perpetually standing at the edge of a cliff, simultaneously terrified of falling and desperate to jump. My apartment was a modest one-bedroom in Queens, a 40-minute subway ride from Lorenzo's Fifth Avenue tower. I showered quickly, trying to wash away the lingering tension from our confrontation. The red dress hung on my closet door where I'd left it this morning, an impulse purchase I'd made last week, telling myself I deserved something pretty, even if it cost more than I should have spent. The fabric was silk, the color a deep crimson that made my skin glow. The neckline was modest, but the dress hugged every curve before flaring slightly at my knees. I'd never worn anything like it, never had a reason to. I studied myself in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back. With my hair in loose curls, subtle makeup highlighting my features, and the red dress transforming me into someone confident and alluring, I looked like I belonged in Lorenzo's world. Like I could walk into any 5-star restaurant and command attention. The thought made me uncomfortable and thrilled in equal measure. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. Running 15 min late. Meet you at Ricci's at 8? I confirmed and grabbed my clutch, trying to ignore the tight feeling in my chest. This was good. This was normal. This was what regular people did. They went on dates with nice, boring men who didn't make them feel like they were constantly playing with fire. The restaurant Tyler had chosen was upscale Italian, all dim lighting and white tablecloths. I arrived first, giving my name to the hostess and following her to a table near the back. The space was crowded with the dinner rush, conversations creating a pleasant hum of background noise. I ordered a glass of wine and waited, people watching to pass the time. Couples celebrating anniversaries, business dinners winding down, a group of women laughing over shared appetizers, normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware of the parallel world that existed just beneath the surface of their everyday reality, a world where men like Lorenzo Vitale made the kind of decisions that could end lives with a phone call. I was so lost in thought that I almost didn't notice when Tyler arrived, slightly breathless and apologetic. Lily, sorry, work emergency. He was handsome in a conventional way. Blonde hair, blue eyes, strong jaw. His suit was expensive but not custom-made. His smile was charming but not dangerous. Everything about him screamed, safe choice. No worries, I said, returning his smile. I just got here myself. The date started well enough. Tyler was attentive, asked questions about my work, which I answered vaguely, having learned long ago never to mention Lorenzo's name in casual conversation, and shared amusing anecdotes about his own job. He was everything a first date should be: polite, interested, appropriate. So why did I keep checking my phone? Why did every dark-haired man who passed our table make my pulse jump? Why did I feel like I was betraying someone, by being here? You seem distracted, Tyler observed, refilling my wine glass. Everything okay? Fine, I lied. Just a long day at work. Your boss sounds like a real piece of work. Tyler leaned back, his expression shifting to something more calculated. Demanding hours, high pressure, must be tough. Something in his tone made my internal alarm bells ring, but I pushed the feeling aside. It has its moments. What is it exactly that your company does? You mentioned imports? The question was casual, but his eyes were too focused, too intent. Various things. International trade, mostly. Must be interesting, dealing with all those different markets. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. I've always thought about getting into that sector. Maybe you could give me some insider tips. The alarm bells grew louder. I'm just a secretary, Tyler. I file paperwork and make coffee. Nothing exciting. His hand found mine across the table, his grip just slightly too tight. I bet you're more than that. A woman working for a man like Lorenzo Vitale must know all kinds of interesting things. My blood ran cold. How do you know who I work for? Sophia mentioned it, Tyler said quickly, too quickly. His thumb traced circles on my palm that should have felt pleasant, but instead made my skin crawl. She said you worked for some big-shot businessman. Sophia doesn't know where I work. The words came out flat, cold. I'd been deliberately vague with my friends about my employment, some instinct telling me that associating with Lorenzo Vitale, even as his secretary, was something best kept quiet. So I'll ask again. How do you know who I work for? Tyler's charming mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something harder underneath. Listen, Lily. I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I think this date is over. I moved to stand, but his hand tightened on mine, keeping me in place. Don't make a scene, he said softly, his smile never wavering for the benefit of anyone watching. Just hear me out for a minute. Let go of my hand. My family has some business dealings with Mr. Vitale. Nothing major. Just some overlapping interests in the import sector. His eyes were hard now, calculating. We thought it might be useful to establish a friendly connection. You seem like a smart woman. Lily. Smart enough to understand how these things work. My heart hammered against my ribs. You set this whole thing up. The party, the chance meeting, all of it. I prefer to think of it as strategic networking. His thumb still traced those maddening circles on my skin. We're not asking for anything major, just occasional information. What meetings are happening, who's visiting the office, that sort of thing. In return, we'd compensate you very generously. 6 months ago, I might have been naive enough to be flattered by the attention. 6 months ago, I didn't know what I know now. 6 months ago, I hadn't spent every day watching Lorenzo operate, learning to read the subtle signals that preceded violence, understanding the code that governed his world. And one of the cardinal rules of that world was that betrayal had consequences. You're asking me to spy on Lorenzo Vitale. I kept my voice level, even as fear and fury warred in my gut. Do you have any idea how catastrophically stupid that is? We're asking you to be smart. Your boss isn't a good man, Lily. He's dangerous, violent. Eventually he's going to get taken down, and you don't want to be standing too close when that happens. Tyler leaned forward, lowering his voice. We're offering you a way out. Money, protection, a fresh start, somewhere safe. I stared at him. This handsome stranger who'd orchestrated an elaborate trap disguised as romance. Who's we, exactly? People who can protect you from Vitale when he finds out you know too much. Or people who want to use me against him and will kill me the moment I'm no longer useful. I yanked my hand free with enough force to knock over my wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, and the symbolism wasn't lost on me. I need to leave. This time when I stood, Tyler didn't try to stop me, but his voice followed me. Think about it, Lily. You're not like him. You don't belong in that world. Take the smart way out while you still can. I grabbed my clutch and headed for the exit, my breath coming in short gasps. The hostess looked concerned as I passed, but I couldn't stop, couldn't think, couldn't process what had just happened. Tyler knew where I worked, knew Lorenzo's name. had researched me enough to fabricate an entire meeting, which meant others might know too. Might be watching, waiting for an opportunity to use me against Lorenzo. The night air hit my face as I burst through the restaurant doors, cool and sharp. I stood on the sidewalk, trying to orient myself, trying to remember how to breathe normally. My phone buzzed in my clutch, probably Tyler, sending some follow-up message. I ignored it. The smart thing would be to go home, lock my doors, and start updating my resume. Tomorrow morning, I'd walk into Lorenzo's office and quit. Get out before whatever power play Tyler's family was orchestrating caught me in the crossfire. That was the smart thing. But standing there on that Manhattan sidewalk, the red dress suddenly feeling like a target rather than armor, I found myself thinking about something Lorenzo had said once, late one night when we'd been working alone in the office. We'd been discussing a business rival who'd made an aggressive move, trying to undercut one of Lorenzo's contracts. Predators can sense fear, he'd said, not looking up from the documents he was reviewing. The moment you show it, you become prey. The trick is to decide whether you're going to run or bare your teeth. At the time, I'd thought he was talking about business negotiation. Now, I understood it was a philosophy he lived by. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past Tyler's messages to find the number I'd only ever used for emergencies. Lorenzo had programmed it into my phone my first week, instructing me to call if I ever felt unsafe. I'd laughed at the time, calling him paranoid. I wasn't laughing now. He answered on the first ring. Lily. His voice was different than at the office, rougher, more intimate, like he'd been waiting for my call. Where are you? Ricci's on West 54th. I need... My voice cracked, and I hated myself for the weakness. Can you send someone to pick me up? I don't want to take the subway. Silence for 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours. Then, don't move. I'm 5 minutes away. You're where? But he'd already hung up. I stood under the restaurant's awning, shivering despite the mild evening temperature. 5 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The driver's window lowered, revealing not one of Lorenzo's usual drivers, but the man himself. He wore the same charcoal suit from earlier, though he'd loosened his tie and undone the top button of his shirt. His hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. And his expression, when his gray eyes found mine, was absolutely murderous. Get in the car, Lily. I obeyed, sliding into the passenger seat. The leather was warm, and the interior smelled like his cologne. Lorenzo didn't pull away immediately, just sat there staring straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles went white. What happened? His voice was terrifyingly calm. Did he hurt you? No, not physically. I tried to find the right words to explain. Lorenzo, he knew who you are. He knew I work for you. He tried to recruit me to spy for his family. Lorenzo's jaw muscle jumped. What family? He didn't say exactly. Just said they had overlapping business interests with you in the import sector. Tyler what? His eyes cut to mine. What's his last name? I don't know. We met at Sophia's party, or at least I thought we did. The pieces were clicking into place, each one more damning than the last. It was all staged, wasn't it? He targeted me specifically. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, Tyler Monroe, early 30s, blonde, works at Castellani Financial. How did you... Because I've been watching him watch you for 2 weeks. He finally released the steering wheel, turning to face me fully. His father is Vincent Monroe. They run the waterfront unions, been trying to muscle into my shipping operations for months. My stomach dropped. You knew? You knew someone was watching me and you didn't tell me? I had someone watching him watch you. You were never in danger, Lily. Until I went on a date with him. Which is why I was 3 tables away all evening, waiting for him to show his hand. Lorenzo's voice dropped lower. Did you really think I'd let you walk into a restaurant with a stranger without knowing exactly who he was and what he wanted? I stared at him, torn between fury at his presumption and a traitorous relief that he'd been there. You followed me. I protected you. There's a difference. You had no right. I have every right. He leaned closer, and suddenly the car felt very small. You work for me, Lily. You're part of my organization. That makes you my responsibility. I'm not a possession you can track like a FedEx package. No, you're a liability. The words exploded out of him with uncharacteristic lack of control. You walk around in red dresses looking like that, attracting attention from every man in a 50-mile radius, completely oblivious to the fact that you're a walking target for anyone who wants to get to me. The silence that followed was deafening. Lorenzo looked like he wanted to snatch the words back, his expression shifting from angry to carefully blank in the span of a heartbeat. But it was too late. They hung between us, impossible to ignore. Looking like what? I asked softly. His jaw tightened. Lily? No, you said looking like that. Like what, exactly? Like you know exactly the effect you have. He pulled back, putting distance between us, his control reasserting itself. Like you're trying to drive every man who sees you completely insane. My heart was doing strange things in my chest, racing and stuttering and forgetting how to beat normally. And are you? Insane? Lorenzo didn't answer for a long moment. Then, instead of responding, he started the car and pulled into traffic with perhaps more aggression than necessary. We drove in loaded silence through Manhattan, the city lights streaking past the windows. I should have been processing the danger I'd just escaped, Tyler's proposition, the implications of rival families taking an interest in me. Instead, all I could think about was the way Lorenzo's hands gripped the steering wheel, the muscle jumping in his jaw, the careful way he was not looking at me. Where are we going? I finally asked when I realized we were heading uptown, away from Queens. My place. We need to talk, and I don't trust your apartment's security. My apartment is fine. Your apartment has locks a teenager could pick, and neighbors who wouldn't notice if someone carried you out screaming. He took a sharp turn. You're staying with me tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss permanent arrangements. Permanent arrangements? I twisted in my seat to face him. Lorenzo, I'm not moving into your penthouse just because one guy tried to recruit me. One guy from a family that now knows you're close to me. One guy who will absolutely try again, or send someone else to try. One guy who demonstrated very clearly that you are no longer safe living alone in a neighborhood with minimal security. He had a point, much as I hated to admit it. Tyler knew where I lived, probably knew my routines. The thought of going back to my apartment, of lying in bed wondering if every sound was someone breaking in, made my skin crawl. Just for tonight, I conceded. Then we figure out a real solution. We'll see. His building was one of those exclusive high-rises where the doorman knew you by name, and the elevator required a keycard. We rode up to the top floor in silence, the tension between us thick enough to cut. I'd never been to Lorenzo's home, had never imagined I would be. It felt strangely intimate, crossing this threshold from professional to personal. The penthouse was exactly what I'd expected and nothing like it at the same time. Sleek modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view that probably cost more than my parents' house. Kitchen full of professional-grade appliances that looked barely used. But there were also personal touches, family photographs on the mantel, a well-worn leather chair by the window, bookshelves full of volumes in both English and Italian. Guest room is down the hall, second door on the left, Lorenzo said, shrugging out of his suit jacket and loosening his tie further. There's spare toiletries in the bathroom. I'll have someone bring clothes from your apartment tomorrow. Lorenzo, we should both get some sleep. He turned away, heading toward what I assumed was his own bedroom. It's been a long night. Wait, the word came out before I could stop it. He paused, not turning around. Why were you so angry? When I told you about the date, you looked, I don't know, furious. His shoulders tensed. I wasn't angry. You were. You are. I took a step closer. And you were at the restaurant. You said you were 5 minutes away, but you were already there. You'd been watching the whole time. Slowly, Lorenzo turned to face me. In the dim lighting of his penthouse, with his tie undone and his careful control slipping, he looked different. Less like the cold mob boss and more like a man at the end of his rope. Yes, he said simply. I was watching. Why? Because I'm apparently a masochistic idiot who enjoys torturing himself. A bitter smile curved his lips. Because watching you get ready for a date with another man was its own special kind of hell, but watching you actually go through with it would have been worse. Because I've spent 6 months trying to convince myself that what I feel for you is just physical attraction, just inconvenient lust, and clearly I'm a terrible liar even to myself. The confession hung in the air between us, raw and honest and terrifying. You can't say things like that, I whispered. You're my boss. I know. You're dangerous. I know that too. This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. He took a step closer, and then another, until we were nearly touching. But I'm done pretending, Lily. Done pretending I don't notice every time you walk into a room. Done pretending it doesn't make me insane when other men look at you. Done pretending I didn't want to commit murder tonight, watching Tyler Monroe put his hands on you. My breath caught. Lorenzo. I told myself I'd keep my distance, that I'd be professional, that you deserved someone normal, someone safe, someone who wouldn't drag you into my world. His hand came up, hovering near my face but not quite touching. And then you showed up to work 6 months ago, with your sharp tongue and sharper mind, completely unimpressed by my reputation, rolling your eyes at my orders like I was nothing more than an annoying middle manager. Do you have any idea what that did to me? His hand finally made contact, fingers ghosting along my jaw with devastating gentleness. I've been with beautiful women, sophisticated women, women who knew the rules of my world and played the game perfectly. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. None of them ever called me dramatic in front of my men. None of them ever stole my coffee. None of them ever looked at me the way you do. Like I'm simultaneously the most irritating person on the planet, and something you might actually care about despite your better judgment. I started. But the lie died on my tongue. Because he was right. God help me. He was absolutely right. When did you know? I asked instead. That you felt. The day you found out what I really do. His expression turned rueful. You walked in that morning, put my coffee on my desk, and mentioned the Martinelli shipment like you were discussing the weather. No fear, no judgment, just brutal practicality. I knew then that you were going to ruin me. I thought back to that day, remembering the adrenaline rush of making that choice, of deciding to stay instead of run. I should have left. Yes, he agreed. You absolutely should have. But you didn't. And every day you stayed, every time you pushed back against my orders, every moment you treated me like a person instead of a monster. He trailed off, shaking his head. I was lost before I even realized I'd fallen. The admission should have terrified me. This was Lorenzo Vitale, a man whose name made grown men nervous, who controlled an empire built on violence and fear. Getting involved with him would be signing up for a life of danger, of always looking over my shoulder, of never quite feeling safe. But standing there in his penthouse, his hand cradling my face like I was something precious, I couldn't remember why safety had ever seemed so important. This is insane, I whispered. We barely know each other. I know that you take your coffee with too much cream and not enough sugar. I know you bite your thumbnail when you're nervous. I know you call your mother every Sunday at 9. I know you cry at animal shelter commercials and laugh at terrible puns. I know you keep a photo of your grandmother in your desk drawer and that you touch it when you need courage. His other hand came up, framing my face. I know you, Lily Morgan. Better than you think. And I knew him too, I realized. Knew that he read spy novels in Italian when he couldn't sleep. Knew he preferred his espresso dark and bitter, like his humor. Knew he had a scar on his ribs from a knife fight at 17, and that his mother's death had nearly destroyed him. Knew he donated anonymously to literacy programs, and that he'd once stopped a business meeting to help a lost child find her parents. Knew that beneath the cold exterior was a man capable of devastating tenderness. I'm scared, I admitted. You should be. This isn't some fairy tale, Lily. My life is dangerous. My enemies are ruthless. Getting close to me puts a target on your back that will never disappear. His thumbs stroked my cheekbones. But I'm also tired of pretending I can keep my distance. Tired of watching you from across the office and imagining what it would be like to touch you, to kiss you, to hear you say my name without that professional distance in your voice. Lorenzo, I breathed, and his eyes darkened. Like that, he said roughly. Exactly like that. The first kiss was gentle, questioning. His lips barely brushed mine, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, when I leaned in instead, the tenderness shattered. His hand slid into my hair, tilting my head for better access as he kissed me like a man starving. Like 6 months of restraint had finally broken. I gripped his shirt, pulling him closer, drowning in the taste of him. He tasted like danger and desire and everything I'd been denying I wanted. His hands roamed my back, fingers tracing the zipper of the red dress, and I arched into his touch. This dress, he muttered against my lips. Do you have any idea what it did to me, seeing you in this dress? Tell me, I challenged, and his eyes flashed with dark promise. Later. Right now, I want it off you. He walked me backward toward his bedroom, our lips never breaking contact. The room was dark save for the city lights streaming through the windows, but I didn't care. All that mattered was Lorenzo's hands on my skin, his mouth trailing fire down my neck, the way he said my name like a prayer and a curse. The zipper of the red dress whispered open. Cool air hit my heated skin, and then Lorenzo's hands were there, warm and possessive. The dress pulled at my feet, leaving me in just my underwear and heels, feeling both vulnerable and powerful under his hungry gaze. Beautiful, he murmured, and the reverence in his voice sent shivers down my spine. So beautiful it hurts to look at you. I reached for his shirt, fumbling with the buttons. He helped me, shrugging out of it impatiently. In the dim light, I could see the scar he'd told me about, along with others I didn't know the stories behind. Evidence of a violent life, of danger survived. I traced one with my fingertips, feeling him shudder under my touch. These are who you are, I said softly. But they're not all you are. Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes. Then he was kissing me again, and thought became impossible. There was only sensation. His hands, his mouth, the slide of skin against skin. He laid me on the bed with surprising gentleness, covering my body with his, and I wrapped my legs around his waist, pulling him closer. Tell me to stop, he said, his voice rough with barely controlled desire. Tell me you don't want this, and I'll walk away, sleep on the couch, pretend this never happened. And if I don't want you to stop, then you're mine. The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent heat pooling in my core. No more dates with stockbrokers. No more pretending there's nothing between us. Mine, Lily. In every way that matters. Yours, I agreed, and he groaned, his control finally shattering completely. What followed was everything I'd imagined and nothing like it. Lorenzo was demanding but attentive, rough but careful, taking what he wanted while making sure I took what I needed. He learned my body, like he learned everything. With focused intensity, memorizing every reaction, every sound I made. And when I finally shattered in his arms, he swallowed my cries with his kiss, following me over the edge with my name on his lips. Afterward, we lay tangled in his sheets, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing absent patterns on my shoulder. The city glittered beyond the windows, but inside his bedroom, the world felt impossibly small and safe. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Lorenzo was silent for a moment. "Now, everything changes. You move in here. Security detail 24/7. No more subway. No more late nights alone at your apartment. You stay close where I can protect you." That sounds like a gilded cage. It's the reality of being with me. His arms tightened around me. "I won't apologize for keeping you safe. I should have protested, should have insisted on maintaining my independence. But Tyler's cold proposition was still fresh in my mind, a reminder that I'd stepped into Lorenzo's world whether I wanted to or not. The only question was whether I'd face the dangers alone, or with his protection. "What about work?" I asked. "I can't very well be your secretary and your whatever this is." "Girlfriend," he supplied. "You're my girlfriend now, and you'll keep your job if you want it. I like having you close. Though I may need to hire a second secretary to actually handle the filing, since I plan to spend a lot of time distracting you." Despite everything, I smiled against his chest. "Very professional." I'm a lot of things to Soro. Professional isn't always one of them. The Italian endearment sent a flutter through my stomach. What does that mean? Treasure. Because that's what you are. Rare and precious and worth protecting. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow we have a lot to discuss, and I need to handle the Monroe situation." The reminder of Tyler sent a chill through me. "What are you going to do to him?" "Nothing permanent," Lorenzo assured me. "Just make it very clear that you're under my protection, and any future attempts to use you against me will have severe consequences." "Lorenzo." "Shh. This is how my world works, Lily. Actions have consequences. He tried to use you. Now he pays the price." His voice was steel wrapped in silk. "But because you're asking me to show restraint, I will. This time. For you." It should have bothered me more. The casual way he discussed threatening people. But exhaustion was pulling me under, and Lorenzo's heartbeat beneath my ear was steady and reassuring. In his arms, in his bed, I felt safer than I had in months. As I drifted off, I heard him murmur something in Italian, too soft and quick for me to catch. But I would have sworn it sounded like a prayer. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of fresh coffee. For a moment, I was disoriented. This wasn't my cramped queen's apartment. The bed was too large, the sheets too expensive, the view too spectacular. Then memory crashed back. Lorenzo. The kiss. Everything that followed. I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest, and spotted a note on the pillow beside me, written in Lorenzo's elegant script. Had to handle business. Coffee's in the kitchen. Don't even think about leaving this apartment without security. El Bossy even in love notes. Some things never changed. I found one of his shirts, white dress shirt that fell to mid-thigh on me, and padded out to the kitchen. True to his word, fresh coffee waited in an expensive machine that probably cost more than my car. As I poured a cup, I caught sight of my reflection in the window. Barefoot, wearing Lorenzo Vitale's shirt, hair wild from his hands, lips still swollen from his kisses. I looked thoroughly debauched. I looked happy. I looked terrified. Because this was real now, not some fantasy I could dismiss as inappropriate workplace attraction. Not something I could keep separate from my actual life. Lorenzo had claimed me, and in his world, that kind of claim came with consequences. My phone buzzed on the counter. Lorenzo's security must have retrieved it from my clutch. Messages were flooding in. 3 from Sophia demanding to know how the date went. 2 from an unknown number that made my blood run cold. Last night was a misunderstanding. Let's talk, Tyler. And then, 5 minutes later, don't make this harder than it needs to be. My family can make your life very difficult. I was staring at the messages, trying to decide if I should tell Lorenzo or handle it myself, when the penthouse door opened. Lorenzo strode in, still wearing last night's clothes, but somehow looking impeccable. His eyes found me immediately, and something dark and possessive flashed in their depths. "Good morning," he said. Crossing the space between us, he cupped my face, kissing me thoroughly. "You're wearing my shirt." I didn't have much choice. Someone ripped my dress. "I'll buy you 10 more. His thumb traced my lower lip. "Though I prefer you like this, marked as mine." "So possessive," I murmured against his mouth, but I was smiling. "You have no idea." He pulled back slightly, his expression turning serious. "Tyler sent you messages." Not a question. Of course he knew. "You're monitoring my phone." "I'm protecting you," he corrected. "There's a difference. And yes, I saw the messages. Marco is already handling it." "Handling it how?" Lorenzo's smile was cold. "Let's just say Tyler Monroe will be very busy explaining to his father why he threatened a woman under my protection. By the end of the day, the entire Monroe family will understand that you are completely off limits." The reminder of the violence lurking beneath Lorenzo's polished surface should have frightened me. Instead, I found myself grateful for it. Tyler's threats had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Knowing Lorenzo was handling it allowed me to breathe easier. "I still need clothes," I pointed out. "And to go to work. The office will be chaos without me." "Already taken care of. Marco sent your assistant Rosa to your apartment to pack some things. She should be here within the hour." He guided me to the kitchen island, pressing me onto a bar stool. "As for work, you're taking the day off. We need to discuss security arrangements." "Lorenzo, I can't just not show up. You're the boss's girlfriend now. You can do whatever you want." He moved around the kitchen with surprising competence, pulling out ingredients for breakfast. "Besides, after last night's drama, you need a day to decompress." I watched him crack eggs into a bowl, trying to reconcile this domestic version of Lorenzo with the cold mob boss I'd worked for. "You cook?" My mother insisted all her children learn. She said depending on others for basic survival was a weakness. His expression softened with memory. She also said the way to a person's heart was through their stomach, though she usually meant it more romantically. "Tell me about her." I'd heard him mention his mother before, but always in passing. Always with that mix of love and grief that meant the loss was still raw. Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, focusing on whisking the eggs. She was fierce. Tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall, but when she walked into a room, everyone paid attention. She ran the family legitimately. Restaurants, import business, while my father handled the less legal side. He poured the eggs into a hot pan. "She died when I was 23. Heart attack. Sudden. One day she was arguing with me about my choice of girlfriend. The next day she was gone. I'm sorry. So was I. Still am." He plated the omelet with practiced ease, adding toast and fresh fruit. "She would have liked you. Your stubbornness. Your refusal to be intimidated. She wouldn't have liked me working for her son. No, he agreed, setting the plate before me. She would have hated that part. But she would have respected that you survived 6 months dealing with me without quitting or committing murder. That takes a special kind of patience. I took a bite of the omelet, perfectly cooked, seasoned just right. This is delicious. How did you know I liked mushrooms and Gruyere? Because I pay attention to Soro. I always pay attention to you. He leaned against the counter, coffee cup in hand, watching me eat with satisfaction. Which is why I know you're worried about more than just Tyler's messages. Damn him for being so observant. I'm worried about what this means. Us. Your world isn't exactly safe, Lorenzo. No, it's not. But you've been in my world for 6 months already, whether we were together or not. At least now, I can protect you openly, instead of from the shadows. He set down his cup, moving to stand before me. I know what I'm asking you to accept. The danger, the scrutiny, the fact that my enemies might target you to get to me. If you want to walk away, I'll make sure you're relocated somewhere safe, somewhere they'll never find you. New identity, new life, complete protection. The offer should have been tempting. A chance to escape, to return to normalcy. But the thought of leaving Lorenzo, of never seeing him again, never feeling his hands on me, never hearing him call me tesoro, made my chest ache. And if I don't want to walk away, then you stay here, where I can keep you safe. You keep your job if you want it, though we'll need to be discreet at the office. And you accept that you're mine now, in every way that matters. His hands found my hips, pulling me closer. You accept the guards, the security, the limitations on your freedom, because your safety matters more to me than your independence. That's a lot to ask. I know, but I'm a selfish bastard, Lily. I've wanted you from the moment you walked into my office, and now that I have you, I'm not letting go. His forehead pressed against mine. Tell me you'll stay. I should have thought it through more carefully. Should have made a list of pros and cons, weighed my options rationally. Instead, I found myself saying, I'll stay. But I have conditions. His lips curved. Of course you do. Name them. First, I keep working. I'm not a kept woman, Lorenzo. I need purpose. Agreed. Second, you don't make decisions about my safety without consulting me. I'm not a child to be protected without explanation. That one's negotiable. If there's immediate danger, then you explain it to me as soon as possible after. I held his gaze. I'm serious. I can handle the truth. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark. He considered for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. What else? Third, no lying. About anything. I'd rather deal with a hard truth than a comfortable lie. I can work with that. His hand slid up my sides. Any other demands? Just one. I tangled my fingers in his hair, pulling him closer. You have to remember that I'm with you, because I want to be, not because I'm afraid to leave. The moment this becomes a cage instead of a choice, I'm gone. Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes. I can't promise you'll always feel free. My world has constraints that aren't negotiable, but I can promise I'll never trap you deliberately. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. Liar, I said softly. You'd hunt me to the ends of the earth. Probably, he admitted, but I'd make sure you chose to come back willingly. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Marco, the Monroe situation has escalated. Escalated how? Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Vincent Monroe has requested a meeting, tonight. He wants to discuss mutual interests and the misunderstanding with his son. He looked at me, calculating. He's going to try to smooth things over, offer compensation for Tyler's behavior. And you're going to refuse. I'm going to make it very clear that any further contact with you will result in war." His voice was cold, detached, the mob boss firmly back in place. "Then I'm going to ensure the Monroe family understands that targeting you was the biggest mistake they've ever made." A knock at the door interrupted us. Lorenzo tensed, one hand moving to the small of his back, where I knew he kept a gun. But then he relaxed. "That'll be Rosa with your things." He wasn't wrong. His assistant appeared with 2 large suitcases and several shopping bags. "Miss Morgan," she greeted me with a knowing smile. "I hope I packed everything you might need. If anything's missing, just let me know." "Thank you, Rosa." I tried not to feel awkward about the fact that she'd just seen me in Lorenzo's shirt, clearly having spent the night. But she seemed completely unbothered, as if her boss starting a relationship with his secretary was the most normal thing in the world. After she left, I took the bags to the guest room to change, trying to ignore the fact that Lorenzo followed me, leaning against the doorframe and watching me with dark, hungry eyes. "You're very distracting," I told him, pulling out jeans and a soft sweater. "That's the idea." He crossed the room, spinning me to face him. "You're not sleeping in the guest room anymore." "Lorenzo." "You're mine now, Lily. That means you sleep in my bed, wake up in my arms. Let me know you're safe every night." His hands framed my face. "I need that. Need you close." The vulnerability in his admission undid me. "Okay. But you have to promise not to hog the covers." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face. "I promise nothing. I'm Italian. We're territorial about everything, including blankets." The rest of the day passed in a strange bubble of domesticity. Lorenzo worked from home, taking calls in his study while I explored the penthouse and tried to wrap my head around my new reality. Every so often, he'd emerge to check on me, pulling me into kisses that left me breathless. As evening approached, his mood shifted. The meeting with Vincent Monroe was scheduled for 9 at one of Lorenzo's restaurants, neutral territory with plenty of security. I could see the tension building in his shoulders, the cold focus settling over his features. "I want to come with you," I said, as he was preparing to leave. Lorenzo turned from where he'd been checking his gun. "Absolutely not. He's going to be discussing me. I should be there." "Lily, these meetings can get dangerous. I'm not putting you in the line of fire." "I'm already in the line of fire." I stood my ground, crossing my arms. Tyler targeted me. His father wants to negotiate about me. I deserve to be present for that conversation. Lorenzo studied me for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he nodded. "Fine, but you stay quiet unless I tell you otherwise. And if things go sideways, you do exactly what Marco tells you. Understood?" "Understood." An hour later, we pulled up to Salvatore's, one of Lorenzo's upscale Italian restaurants in Manhattan. The place was closed to the public tonight, with several of Lorenzo's men stationed at the entrances. As we walked in, I felt the weight of their stares, everyone noting that the boss had brought a woman to a business meeting. Vincent Monroe was already seated at a large table in the center of the dining room, flanked by 2 men who were clearly bodyguards. He was older than I'd expected, probably early 60s, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that assessed me with predatory interest when we approached. "Vitale," he greeted Lorenzo, his gaze never leaving me. "And this must be the young lady who's caused all the trouble." "This is Lily Morgan," Lorenzo said coldly, his hand possessive at the small of my back. "My girlfriend. And the reason we're having this conversation." Vincent's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Your son made a serious error in judgment. Tyler was trying to establish a business relationship. Perhaps his methods were overly aggressive, but his intentions were purely professional. His intentions were to recruit my girlfriend to spy on me." Lorenzo's voice was silk over steel. "That's not business, Vincent. That's an act of war. Now let's not be hasty. Let me be very clear. Lorenzo leaned forward slightly. Miss Morgan is under my protection. Any further attempts to contact her, to use her, to even look at her wrong, will result in consequences. Severe consequences. Vincent's jaw tightened. You're being unreasonable. It was a simple misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. Your family tried to use her against me. That's unforgivable. Lorenzo's hand moved to his side, and I knew he was touching his gun. Consider this your only warning. The tension in the room ratcheted up several notches. Vincent's men shifted, hands moving toward their own weapons. Lorenzo's security detail moved closer, creating a protective circle around us. Then Vincent smiled, and the expression sent chills down my spine. You've changed, Vitale. Since when do you let a woman make you emotional? Make you weak? Careful, Lorenzo said softly, and the threat in that single word was unmistakable. You're about 3 seconds from finding out exactly how weak I am. Vincent held up his hands in mock surrender. I'm simply saying that this overreaction seems disproportionate. Tyler made a pass at a pretty girl. You've made it clear she's yours. Why not accept my apology and move on? I'm willing to offer compensation for any distress caused. I don't want your money, Vincent. I want your assurance that your family will never approach Lily again. That you'll spread the word through every organization in this city that she's completely off limits. And if I refuse? Lorenzo's smile was terrifying. Then we go to war, and I systematically dismantle everything you've built. Starting with your waterfront operations and ending with your son's kneecaps. The crude threat should have shocked me. Instead, I found myself oddly touched by Lorenzo's vehemence, his absolute refusal to allow anyone to threaten me. Vincent studied Lorenzo for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Then he sighed. Fine. You have my word. The Monroe family will stay away from Miss Morgan. We'll put out the word that she's under Vitale protection. Smart choice. Lorenzo's hand tightened on my back. Now get out of my restaurant. We watched them leave, tension slowly draining from the room. As soon as the door closed behind the Monroes, Lorenzo turned to me, his hands framing my face. You okay? I'm fine. That was. I searched for words. Intense. That was restrained. If you hadn't been here, I would have put a bullet in him for suggesting you were a weakness. He pressed his forehead to mine. You're not a weakness, Tesoro. You're my strength, the reason I get up every morning wanting to build something better. My heart clenched at the admission. Lorenzo. I know it's too soon. I know we're moving too fast. But I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Like I'd burn down the world if it meant keeping you safe. His thumb stroked my cheek. Like I'd walk away from all of this. The power, the empire, everything, if you asked me to. Don't, I whispered. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because it makes me believe in impossible things, like happy endings for people in your world. What if I told you I'm planning to make us possible? That I've been working for years to legitimize my businesses, to separate myself from the violence? He pulled back slightly, meeting my eyes. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want you to think I was doing it for you. But the truth is, meeting you accelerated my timeline. Made me realize I wanted a future where I could have both the empire and the woman I love. The words hung between us, raw and honest and terrifying. You love me? So much it scares me. His voice was rough. I've done terrible things, Lily. I've hurt people, made choices that haunt me. But with you, I want to be better. Want to deserve you. I kissed him then, pouring everything I couldn't say into the contact. When we finally broke apart, Both breathing hard, I whispered, "Take me home." "With pleasure." The drive back to the penthouse was charged with tension. Lorenzo's hand stayed on my thigh, possessive and warm. Every so often, he'd glance at me with dark eyes that promised exactly what would happen when we were alone. As soon as we were inside, he pressed me against the door, his mouth finding mine with desperate hunger. I wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me to the bedroom, our clothes leaving a trail behind us. "Mine," he growled against my throat, and I gasped as his teeth scraped sensitive skin. "Yours," I agreed, and he groaned, lifting me onto the bed with surprising gentleness despite the urgency between us. What followed was different from the first time. Slower, more deliberate. Lorenzo took his time learning my body, discovering what made me gasp, what made me moan. And when he finally joined our bodies, it felt like something shifting into place, two pieces of a puzzle that had always been meant to fit together. Later, as we lay tangled in sweaty sheets, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin, I asked the question that had been haunting me since the restaurant. What happens if Vincent doesn't keep his word? Lorenzo's hand stilled. Then I keep mine. War. How many people would die? Too many. His voice was heavy. Which is why I made the threat credible enough that he'll respect it. Vincent Monroe is a businessman first. He'll weigh the cost of pursuing you against the cost of war with me, and he'll realize it's not worth it. And if he doesn't? And then I protect what's mine, whatever the cost. He rolled to face me, his expression serious. "I won't lie to you, Lily. My world is violent. People die. Lines get crossed. If you stay with me, you'll see things, hear things, know things that you can't unknow. Are you sure you can handle that?" I thought about Tyler's cold proposition, Vincent's predatory assessment, the casual way they'd discussed using me as a pawn. Lorenzo's world might be violent, but at least he was honest about it. At least he valued me as more than a tool. "I'm sure," I said finally, "but I need you to promise me something. Anything. Don't let it consume you. The violence, the power, the need for control. Don't lose yourself in it so completely that there's nothing left of the man I fell for." Something vulnerable flashed in his eyes. "You fell for me?" Somewhere between you being insufferably bossy and surprisingly gentle, yes. I fell. I touched his face, feeling the scratch of stubble under my palm. Probably the most dangerous thing I've ever done. Definitely the most dangerous thing you've ever done. His smile was self-deprecating. "But I promise I'll try to stay human for you. Try to remember there's more to life than power plays and territory wars. That's all I ask." We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the city lights painting patterns on the walls, and for the first time since moving to New York, I felt like I'd found home. Not a place, but a person. The next morning, we established a new routine. Lorenzo made coffee while I showered. We had breakfast together before heading to the office in his car, Marco driving while we reviewed the day's schedule. At work, we maintained professional distance, though I caught him watching me more than once with heated eyes that promised later. It should have been awkward, this transition from boss and secretary to lovers. But somehow it worked. The banter between us took on new layers. The casual touches became loaded with promise. And when we were alone in his office, he'd pull me onto his lap and kiss me until we both forgot why maintaining professional boundaries mattered. "We're terrible at discretion," I said one afternoon, adjusting my blouse after a particularly intense makeout session on his desk. "I don't care." Lorenzo straightened his tie, looking thoroughly satisfied. "Let them talk. Let everyone know you're mine." So possessive. You love it. I couldn't argue with that. A week passed in blissful routine. No more threats from the Monroes. No more late-night danger. Just work during the day and Lorenzo's bed at night. I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work, that love could survive in his dark world. Then everything changed. I was in Lorenzo's office, organizing files, when Marco burst in without knocking. His face was grim. "Boss, we have a problem." Lorenzo looked up from his laptop. "What kind of problem?" "Vincent Monroe is dead, shot outside his home 2 hours ago." Marco's gaze flicked to me. "And someone's leaking rumors that we ordered the hit." The color drained from Lorenzo's face. "What?" "It wasn't us, right?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Lorenzo had been with me all night, all morning. There was no way. Of course it wasn't us. Lorenzo was already moving, grabbing his phone. "But someone wants us to take the fall. Marco, get our lawyers on standby and find out who's spreading these rumors." "There's more," Marco said grimly. "Tyler Monroe is calling for revenge. He's rallying the other families, saying you broke the peace agreement, saying you killed his father in cold blood." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "He's using this as an excuse to start the war we avoided. Or someone else killed Vincent and made it look like us to start a war." I voiced what we were all thinking. Who benefits from you and the Monroes destroying each other? 6 other families. Lorenzo ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration. And all of them would happily watch us tear each other apart. "What do we do?" I asked. Lorenzo looked at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw real fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for me. "We prepare for war." The next 72 hours were a blur of tension and preparation. Lorenzo moved me to a safe house, a fortified apartment in a building he owned, with armed guards at every entrance. I hated the confinement, but understood the necessity. If Tyler Monroe wanted revenge, I'd be his first target. Lorenzo visited when he could, always surrounded by security, always looking more exhausted than the time before. The strain of managing a crisis while trying to keep me safe was taking its toll. "You should eat," I said one evening, watching him push food around his plate untouched. "You're not going to be effective if you collapse from exhaustion." "I'll eat when this is over." But he took a bite anyway, just to please me. We're close to identifying who really killed Vincent. Once we have proof, we can show the other families that we're being framed. And if Tyler doesn't care about proof, if he just wants an excuse to go after you, then I'll give him exactly what he wants. Lorenzo's expression was cold, but on my terms, not his. 3 days after Vincent's murder, the breakthrough came. Marco had traced the actual killer, a professional hitman hired by the Russo family, one of Lorenzo's smaller rivals. They'd killed Vincent and planted evidence pointing to Lorenzo, hoping to trigger a war that would eliminate both families. The proof was irrefutable: phone records, financial transfers, witness statements. Lorenzo called a meeting of all the major families, presenting the evidence with Marco and his lawyers flanking him. I watched from the secure video feed in the safe house, my heart in my throat as Lorenzo made his case. Tyler Monroe sat stone-faced throughout the presentation. When Lorenzo finished, Tyler stood. "Even if this is true, it doesn't change anything. My father is dead, and your world killed him. Someone has to pay." "Then let it be the Russos," Lorenzo said coldly. "They murdered your father and tried to frame me for it. They manipulated you into calling for my head. Are you going to let them get away with that?" The other family heads were murmuring now, convinced by the evidence. Tyler's allies were abandoning him one by one, recognizing that continuing to pursue Lorenzo would make them look foolish at best, complicit at worst. Finally, Tyler slumped back into his chair. "Fine, we go after the Russos. But this isn't over, Vitale. My family doesn't forget." "Neither does mine," Lorenzo replied evenly. "Remember that." The meeting ended, and I sagged with relief. It wasn't perfect. Tyler still harbored resentment. The Russos would face retaliation. But at least open war had been avoided. At least Lorenzo was safe. He came to the safe house that night, looking drained, but relieved. I met him at the door, wrapping my arms around him before he could say a word. For a long moment, we just stood there, holding each other, letting the tension drain away. "It's over," he murmured against my hair. "You can come home now." "This was never about the apartment, Lorenzo. I am home as long as I'm with you." He pulled back to look at me, his eyes soft with emotion. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question. I kissed him gently, though I suspect it has something to do with excellent coffee-making skills. He laughed, the sound rusty from days of stress. That must be it. We went back to the penthouse that night, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe. The crisis had passed. We'd survived. But Lorenzo's world had shown its teeth, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the next threat emerged. A month later, things had settled into a new normal. I was back at work, though now everyone knew I was Lorenzo's girlfriend. Some of his associates treated me with new respect, others with thinly veiled disapproval. I didn't care. I had Lorenzo, had meaningful work, had a life that felt purposeful despite its dangers. We were in his office one afternoon when I made the decision that had been building for weeks. I want to learn. Lorenzo looked up from his paperwork. Learn what? Your world. How it works, who the players are, what the rules are. I leaned against his desk. If I'm going to be with you, I need to understand the chessboard. Need to see the moves before they happen. He studied me for a long moment. It's not too late to walk away, you know. To choose the safe, normal life. I'm choosing you. That's my normal now. I held his gaze steadily. Teach me. And so he did. Over the following months, Lorenzo educated me in the Byzantine politics of his world. I learned which families could be trusted, which were rivals, which were merely waiting for an opportunity to strike. I learned to read the subtle signals in meetings, to understand the weight of certain words and gestures. It was like learning a new language, one where silence sometimes spoke louder than words, and where respect was currency, as valuable as money. Lorenzo was a patient teacher, never talking down to me, always treating my questions seriously. And slowly, I stopped being just his girlfriend who needed protection. I became his partner, someone he consulted on strategy, someone whose insights he valued. "You're good at this," he said one night, after I'd correctly predicted a rival's next move. Scary good. I had an excellent teacher. I curled into his side on the couch, and I pay attention. That you do. His arm tightened around me. I've been thinking about the future. Oh. About what happens when I'm ready to step back from the more dangerous aspects of my business. About who could run things in a way that maintains our power, but reduces the violence. He looked down at me. About whether you'd ever consider being more than just my girlfriend. My heart stuttered. Lorenzo. I'm not proposing, not yet. His thumb stroked my shoulder. But I want you to know that when I do, and I will, it won't just be about love. It'll be about partnership, about building something together that's stronger than either of us alone. That sounds like a Mafia marriage proposal. Because it is. He turned me to face him. In my world, marriage is as much about alliance and partnership as it is about love. I want all of that with you, Lily. Want to bind our lives together in every way that matters. I should have been scared by the intensity of his declaration. Instead, I felt something settle deep in my chest, a certainty I'd never experienced before. Ask me. Not yet. He kissed me softly. When I propose, it'll be perfect. A moment worthy of the woman who changed my life by being impossible to ignore and even harder to resist. 6 months after that first night in the red dress, Lorenzo took me back to Ricci's restaurant, the scene of our first date disaster. But this time, the entire place was closed to everyone but us. Candles lit every surface. A string quartet played softly in the corner. And when Lorenzo knelt beside my chair, a velvet box in his hand, I knew this was the perfect moment he'd promised. "Lily Morgan," he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "You walked into my life in sensible shoes and a cheap suit, completely unimpressed by everything I'd built. You called me dramatic. You stole my coffee. You made me laugh when I'd forgotten I still could. And somewhere between your eye rolls and sharp comebacks, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you." Tears were already streaming down my face. "I can't promise you safety. My world is too dangerous for that. I can't promise you simplicity. My life is too complicated." His thumb stroked my hand. "But I can promise you everything I have. My heart, my loyalty, my protection, my partnership in building something better than what came before. Marry me, Tesoro. Be my wife, my partner, my everything." "Yes," I managed through tears. "Yes, you impossible, bossy, wonderful man. Yes." He slid the ring onto my finger, a stunning emerald-cut diamond flanked by smaller stones, elegant and somehow perfect. Then he stood, pulling me into his arms and kissing me as the quartet swelled into something triumphant. "I love you," he murmured against my lips. "My Lily, my treasure, my home." "And I love you," I replied. "My Lorenzo, my impossible choice, my perfect danger." We married 3 months later in a small ceremony attended by both our worlds, his family and mine, his business associates and my friends, the legitimate and the less so. My father walked me down the aisle, looking slightly shell-shocked by the entire thing. My mother cried through the whole ceremony, but when Lorenzo took my hands and pledged himself to me, in English and Italian, his voice breaking slightly on the promises, nothing else mattered. Not the danger, not the complications, not the whispers about what I was getting myself into. All that mattered was the way he looked at me like I was his salvation, like I'd taken a man who'd lived in darkness and shown him light. Our first dance was to an Italian love song his mother had favored. Lorenzo held me close, whispering the translation in my ear. "You are my sun, my moon, my stars. Without you, I am lost in darkness." "Good thing I'm here to light the way then," I teased, and he laughed, spinning me around the dance floor. Later, as we left for our honeymoon, a month in Italy visiting Lorenzo's family estates, I looked back at the reception, at the unlikely collection of people celebrating our union, at the life I'd stumbled into by sending one accidental text message to the wrong number. "Any regrets?" Lorenzo asked, following my gaze. I turned to face him, this dangerous, powerful, surprisingly tender man who'd claimed my heart without permission and protected it fiercely ever since. Only that I didn't wear the red dress more often. Clearly, it has magical powers. That dress nearly killed me. His hands found my waist, pulling me close. Watching you walk out in it, knowing you were getting ready for another man, I wanted to lock you in my penthouse and never let you leave. So possessive. Always. He kissed me thoroughly, ignoring the cheers from the remaining guests. "But you love it." "I love you," I corrected. "The possessiveness is just a bonus. Where are you going in that dress?" He demanded 6 months ago, jealousy and desire warring in his voice. Now I finally had the answer, exactly where I was meant to be. Home.